As you know, we have been working on the consequences of Israel's existence in the Middle East, in the region. And as you know, a couple of days ago was also the Quds Day around the world. So we have some questions that I would like to know your opinion about these questions. So shall we proceed?
Okay.
So, Mr. Walberg, for the first question, I'd like to ask if you think that the formation of the Zionist regime is considered a sinister phenomenon only for the Palestinians who were expelled from their homeland and are constantly persecuted, or its sinister nature is not limited to only Palestinians and puts other nations and countries of the world into trouble as well.
Uh, what you're asking, the Zionist regime, is it a danger to the world or just to the Palestinians? Well, first of all, to the Palestinians, of course, because they were dispossessed of their land. This was a colonial invention. It's really arising out of British colonial imperialist thinking to make a settler colony. Like Canada is very much like Israel. We had native people, but they were pushed aside, and then the white settlers came in and basically stole their land. So Israel is recapitulating. It's doing again the same thing that was done by the British when it expanded its empire around the world. So, and of course, the British Empire was a danger to the whole world. It was expanding, expanding, expanding. So Israel is still expanding. It has no borders. So this, of course, it's a danger, and it also is a danger to Jews themselves. Before Zionism, there was anti-Jewish sentiment, but it was not as strong as it became in the 20th century. And Zionism was really the motivating factor in people, because they saw that this Zionist regime was hostile, aggressive, and was warlike. So it turned people more and more against the supporters of this regime, which are, of course, the Jews around the world, most Jews. Very few Jews resist this. So that is the basis upon which Israel and its danger to the world. Also, it's always at war. It was founded in 1948, but it was really fighting from the 1920s on. New immigrants all the time taking over land. It was dispossessing people, buying up land. It was a threat. So it was really at war from the 1920s, Israel. So it's been at war with the people where it lived, where the immigrants came, for 100 years. So this is not just, we think of the Afghan war, oh, it's been going on for, how long is it, 20 years? Well, try looking at Israel if you want to see a really long-term hostile regime that is threatening really not just its neighbors, but through its undeclared nuclear arsenal too. It threatens everyone. I've seen quotes of Israeli leaders or ex-leaders saying to Europeans, you better watch out. If you turn against us, we've got bombs. We can bomb Bonn, Zurich, we can bomb wherever we want. So that kind of hostility is integral to the Israeli regime.
Thank you, Mr. Walberg. As you know, we are an anti-war and anti-intervention group in the Middle East, And one issue we are examining is the root and causes of war and insecurity in this region. Some believe that what is happening in Afghanistan, Iraq, Libya, Syria, or Iran, and other countries such as, including wars or sanctions, is closely linked to Israel's will. What is your opinion in this regard?
Well, yes, the wars that are going on now, they were all predicted. They were laid out before any of them started in the project for the New American Century. This is a neo-con document issued just prior to 9/11 in the year 2000, in 2001. This was the program that the Bush and Cheney were acting on. And so after 9/11, we don't know who did 9/11, although Israel is probably involved, we don't know for sure. But we do know that all of these wars from Afghanistan on were inspired by this thinking of the neocons and neoliberals, who are really inspired themselves by Israel and this kind of aggressive control of the world through arms and through war. So all of these wars were, and they're all against countries that are resisting the Israel or resisting America.
Professor, excuse me,
Yes.
can you hear me now?
Yes.
Oh, I thought I lost you for a moment.
No.
So
No.
please continue.
You can look at this theoretically. Rothschild, the great banking dynasty of the 19th, 20th century and 21st century in Europe, he said famously, "Give me control of a nation's money, and I control their politics." Well, there is another law, Clausewitz, that give me or war is just a continuation of politics by other means. So you can link Jewish control of money with these wars. That the wars really derive from the engine of growth, which is capitalism, which requires banking and high finance. So there is a very strong connection between the banking tradition of the Jewish elite around the world and the wars that are carried out by the imperial power of the day. In 100 years ago, it was Britain. Now it's America. And again, the Jews have a tradition of the banking and then rising through their control of banking to advising the leaders. And this is exactly what we see today with Secretary of State Blinken, who is a very strong Zionist and who pursues these wars using something called R2P, is right to protect. This is a doctrine that was thought up and was actually used through the UN for a while before it was really discredited as a cover for imperialist wars. The idea is that America should be protecting human rights around the world. So if it looks at a country, of course, human rights are violated everywhere in the world, unfortunately. But what America does is it focuses on those countries that are resisting its policies. And Israel is part of really the American empire and the American thinking. So there's an actual continuity between those hostile to Israel and their hostility to America. It becomes a packaged deal, if you want to say.
Thank you, Mr. Walberg. And for the last question, in other words, do you think it is possible to be anti-war in the Middle East, but indifferent to Israel and its role in the region?
No, it's not, because Israel really is, as Ayatollah Khamenei very sharply said and very, I think, accurately, Israel's not a country. It's not a country. Countries have borders that are agreed upon with their neighbors. They have good relations. They trade with their neighbors. That's what countries do. Israel cannot trade with its neighbors. It's constantly expanding, taking over its neighbors' territory. Syria takes Syrian territory. It, of course, takes all the Palestinian territory. And there are plans, the real Zionist plan is from sea to sea, from the Mediterranean to the Red Sea. It really wants Sinai, all of these uh, um, plans are still there in Zionist thinking, and it really requires united effort by countries, not only its neighbors but from around the world, to try and prevent Israel from continually expanding and taking over other countries. So it's not a country. This is terrorism. This is outright terrorism, and Israel really is the master. And of course, the real problem is you're not allowed to say this. If you, other than Iran, no country allows criticism of Israel. The Zionists have passed laws in America. They try to do the same in Canada to prevent you from criticizing Israel. They say that this is anti-Semitism, just criticizing Israel. So that is really the big problem. It's like the emperor's new clothes. No one is allowed to say that the emperor is naked. And if someone says, look, that emperor's got no clothes on at all, then the emperor would be embarrassed and would his whole false reality would collapse around him. So this is really where we are with Israel today.
Thank you, Mr. Walberg. I have another question. What do you think we're supposed to do? What do you think it takes to stop Israel in starting wars, to put an end, stop on this move?
You just have to keep working with allies wherever you are. I'm in Canada, so there is really not a lot of opportunity, but I do write books and articles. I sign online petitions. I talk with people. People like what I write, but they say, we can't talk about this. We can't mention your name because then we'll be called anti-Semitism.
Actually, we'd appreciate if you can, share us those articles that you've written with us. It'll be great, so we can work on them, spread them.
Sure.
Is it possible?
Yes, I will send you my book, which is in Persian. It was translated, Canada-Israel Nexus. If you know Reza Montazami.
Yes, we've read your book, actually.
Oh, you've read it? Okay,
yes.
Well then, really, it's all there. But if you just look at my website, I encourage your listeners to go to my website, ericwalberg.com, and you can see Middle East. There are lots of articles, lots of interviews dealing with these issues of Jewish thinking, of how Zionism arose and how it became such a lethal force in the world. So yes, so there are things you can do. Iran does its best. Al-Quds Day is very important to show that it's not just a territorial dispute in Palestine. It is a jihad. It's Muslims must protect other Muslims who are being persecuted, and that is the case. And you don't have to be. Biden famously said, "You don't have to be Jewish to be a Zionist." Well, I would change his quotes and say, you don't have to be Muslim to be anti-Zionist. So I encourage my friends to be anti-Zionist, to stand up for the real human rights, your right to your land, to your safety from attack, from invasion. That's surely the most fundamental human right of all.
Thank you, Mr. Walberg. What do you think about the relation between Israel and the world's economy?
Okay, it's a very broad question. I mean, Israel itself is really, it's not a big country, but it is a big manufacturer of arms. It exports arms. I think it's second or third largest arms exporter, even though it's a tiny country, and even though the U.S. and Russia and Germany are, and Britain, it's probably number 5 or number 6. So it's very, and it sells wherever it can make a profit, but also to further its own ends. So it's shaping politics through its military exports, also through its high tech. Jews are famously very well educated, respect intellectual activity. So really, the top people in any area of production, of industry, of science are often Jews that are Zionists. Some are not Zionists, but very few. So most of these intellectuals are serving Israel, even if not directly. So it does play a very important role in the world economy and, of course, in world thinking through its financial strength, through its Rothschilds and other banking dynasties, is world politics too. So it's an ongoing, it's a tradition really of the last 200, 300 years. Prior to that, Jews were not nearly so instrumental in world politics. It was only really with the rise of capitalism that Jews became more of a threat than a benefit wherever they are.
Thank you, Mr. Walberg, for your time. I appreciate it. If you have any comments that you think you feel that it is important to be said about this subject, we'll be happy to hear.
Well, yes, it's good to be in touch with you. If you want more interviews, I'm happy to do that.